Okay, we've got some sad news to report in the world of rugby union, and that is former England captain and 2003 World Cup winner Lewis Moody has been diagnosed with motor neurone disease, aged 47. Um, it hits home a little bit more this one because when I was 15 years ago when I was playing at Bracknell Rugby Club, above the bar you actually see a little plaque and you see Lewis Moody's first ever England jersey signed, and that's where he played his youth rugby. He first played youth rugby at the age of 11, which is the year I was born, 1989-1990 season. And obviously, he would go on to ultimately win the World Cup, captain England. And obviously, with only being a couple of years since Rob Burrow, literally 2 years to the day almost since Rob Burrow passed away, the timing of this, couldn't hit home anymore. And it's not just rugby union it impacts and rugby league; it's all sports. Science doesn't understand why, but there's a higher prevalence in the population of former athletes being diagnosed with motor neurone disease than non-athletes in the general population. And science doesn't know why. Now, there's been a lot of discussion around concussion and player welfare, like other injuries, like contact injuries and the muscular injuries, and then of course trapped nerves and all this in regards to player welfare. Since the playing days of Lewis Moody, the player welfare and the concussion protocols and the other player welfare and the now limiting contact training and limiting the amount of games, it's completely different to what it was 20 years ago when he was playing at his top, at the top level. Completely different now to what it was when Lewis Moody was playing at his best. But there is still an unknown causal link somewhere between being a professional athlete, even in non-contact sports like swimming and cycling, and motor neurone disease. Even lesser known athletes like Stephen Darby in football, motor neurone disease. Now, he had to retire because of it at age 28, and that was about 6-7 years ago. So the time frame prognosis between diagnosis and ultimately passing away varies from person to person. In Rob Burrow's case, he declined quite quickly, whereas Doddy Weir and Hughes van der Westhuizen, their decline took longer before the disease really started to take hold and attack the muscles and the nervous system. And it is devastating. It's a devastating disease. It's got no cure. But the prognosis from diagnosis to passing away varies from individual to individual. Lewis Moody could have the next 4 or 5 years, it could be quite a gentle decline, and he could still obviously function on day-to-day tasks, and he does his commentary with when the Six Nations is on. He's a pitchside pundit in the past. He's written in the media, in the newspapers. He's appeared on radio and on podcasts. He's done a lot of media commitments. He could still do that for the next 3, 4, 5, 6 years, or it could happen within the next 12 months, 18 months. He could be wheelchair bound. This is what science is trying to figure out: is they don't know why, from individual to individual, motor neurone disease impacts them quicker or slower. And if it wasn't for Kevin Sinfield and all the fundraising he did for Rob Burrow and Doddy Weir, Doddy Weir didn't pass away that long ago either, and before them, Hughes van der Westhuizen's foundation, these legends of rugby, gentlemen each, all have captained club and country at some point, and all of them were diagnosed in their 30s and 40s. I think all of them were diagnosed younger than Lewis Moody has been, which is really striking how young the age range is of diagnosis. Stephen Darby at 28, Lewis Moody to 47. It's not a wide age range really. It's only 19 years age range in age. It is quite striking, and they're all playing different sports. There is head contact, obviously. There is also physical contact with the body, and then the joints and the muscles and the nerves, and And what is striking about all is they mention when they first got diagnosed, they felt a numbness down an arm or a leg, and they believed it was an old injury. They go to the doctor runs some tests, and then they go, no, this is MND. Now the research is obviously still trying to figure out what causes MND. But I think this one with Lewis Moody hits home a little bit harder because he played at the same rugby club I played at, would regularly visit the club, take training sessions with the youth teams, watch the various teams play from the first all the way down to the juniors, and was still actively involved in the grassroots rugby community. And he would regularly see not only Lewis Moody but a lot of his England teammates. When I was a teenager at Bracknell Cinema, Bracknell Bowling Alley, and Bracknell Pizza Hut back in the day, they would frequent on a Monday or a Wednesday Six Nations or Autumn Internationals. During the week build up to a game, they would have team nights out where some players would go to the cinema, some would go to the restaurant, some would go bowling, and they would rotate which members of the squad would do what and with who. They would, there was someone new in the camp, and you would meet players like Lewis Moody and Ben Cohen and Steve Thompson, who's had his own issues with early onset dementia. And what is quite striking is these players from the 90s and the 2000s, a lot of them are now reporting early onset dementia, memory loss, and in Lewis Moody's case, motor neuron disease. Obviously, Sebastian Chabal and Steve Thompson are another high-profile players from the 2003 World Cup and that era of the transition from amateur to professional in regards to rugby union, who are having their own health battles. Different conditions, true, but their own health battles. And they're all quite young. They're all in their mid to late 40s at the moment, and it is quite troubling how young they are. Some of them haven't been retired that long. I mean, Lewis Moody only retired, I think, 2013. I think Lewis Moody retired, so he's been retired, 12 years? And it's really striking how young they are. And there is no known cure. But I do think with the amount of awareness that Kevin Sinfield has raised in regards to Rob Burrow especially, but also Doddy Weir, how much money he's raised for the research side of things and the awareness and keeping it in the public consciousness quite regularly, because he's still doing his fundraising even now. I think in regards to Lewis Moody, I think the research is going to continue to improve. And also then the post-diagnosis prognosis in regards to comfort and treatment and quality of life, I think, for sufferers, including Lewis Moody, I think will be better until a cure can be found, if a cure can be found, because it is a terminal disease. There is no cure. And scientists are still trying to figure out why professional athletes are more likely to develop MND and be diagnosed than the general population. Like, seriously, it's staggering looking at not just the contact sports but the non-contact sports as well. Science is still baffled as to why athletes are more prone to the disease than non-athletes. And they're still trying to figure out if there's a causal link between concussion and other body injuries and MND as well, like a trapped nerve or muscular injury or a leg break or anything like that, where there is nerve damage and there is muscular damage, with the nervous system. Could that also be a causal link? Professional athletes, even when they're training, they put their bodies under huge strain, not just in competition. So it is interesting looking at it. But unfortunately, and it's quite sad that Lewis Moody has been diagnosed, and he's one of the nicest people on the field. He was an animal, but off the field, one of the gentlest human beings you could possibly ever meet. And when I was playing at Bracknell Rugby Club, 15 years ago, he would still visit the rugby club. He would still pop in. If he wasn't selected for England that weekend, or he wasn't playing for England that weekend, he would still pop in quite regularly, and watch games, get involved with the youth training sessions, involved in fundraising for the club, and he would just generally talk to members and fans who would come down on a match weekend to watch the first team play, or a semi-professional at the time, and engage with players and former players and club officials. And some of my teammates in the third, fourth squad played youth rugby with him in the 80s and 90s, and some of them, coached him. Some of the coaches at the club coached him, and this is where I think at grassroots level and at the lower levels of the game, it's a community game. All sport is, and I think that's what's going to really hit home is there's people that I've played with who know him much better than I've only met him a couple of times in fleeting as a teenager when I was at school and when I was playing, but there'll be those who've known him for 30, 35, years, who will be more impacted than the average rugby fan. But it's really, it's heartbreaking news to think that yet another high profile former athlete, who's inspired many to play, is going to be battling motor neurone disease, and yet we don't understand why it occurs, and there's no cure. So we shall see, and we shall follow Lewis Moody's progress and see how it all goes. But it's heartbreaking. It is. But there we go. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll have some more, hopefully happier content for you all very, very soon.